I'm Ada Bobbitt. I serve on the United Way Venture Forward team. And today's session is really exciting. It's our third session in the Innovation Techniques for Nonprofits series. So Kristi, Montgomery, and Trever, tell me how to say your last name.
Ehrlich.
Okay, I didn't want to say it wrong. So they are both from Kenco Innovation Labs, and they are going to be sharing with us today. We have a really great presentation. I'm excited to learn and participate. And so thank you for joining us. Before I hand it over to Kristi, I just wanted to say that we are recording this session. We just have to say that out loud to make sure that you are aware. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, today's group is small, so feel free to unmute yourself or to share it in the chat. I know that Kristi and Trever probably will love questions anytime you want to engage, so please be sure to do so. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to Kristi.
All right, well, thanks. I think most of you know me. Carla for sure does, and Patrick does. So Mary Ellen, I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting. Thanks for taking your time. Trever and I are lone innovators at Kenco, and that's probably not the way I should say that, but we are the only ones on the official innovation team. But we at Kenco are a very innovative company. So we've been that way. We're about to celebrate 70 years. So in 2015, I was given the opportunity to leave our IT group and form an innovation team. And so a little bit about, what it is that we do in the Innovation Lab and where we do it. These are some pictures from our official grand opening of our warehouse space that we opened in October that allows us to actually test our theories and prototype things for our customers. And that's what we're here to talk about today is really about how do you prototype, how do you test in an effective manner that is cost effective as well. And so we do a lot of research before we ever do anything. We spend a lot of time on the customer end of the journey, trying to figure out what their problems are, what their pain points are, and getting to finding that right solution for them. So this is who we are. Kenco is a warehousing, logistics, transportation company, which doesn't sound very exciting, but when you think about today's world and where we are with COVID-19, the world has moved away from, how do we find more people to do things, and how do we find automation? How do we bring more automation into our facilities so that our people can be safe and do their jobs well and social distance and do what they have to do without encountering the virus. And also, I mean, as you well know, when this first started, you couldn't find toilet paper on the shelf, right? So we at Kenco, that's one of our customers is a toilet paper manufacturer. We also have the manufacturer of Lysol and Purell on our books as customers. So, our team didn't have the option to go work from home. They had to keep going. So some of our innovation, involved how do we help them do that? And we continue to do that with our customers. How do we help them continue to be safe and keep working? So I know we all appreciate those that are on the front lines that are working, but I don't think a lot of folks realize that, transportation and logistics folks are just as much on the front lines of this as anything else. So that's a little bit about Kenco and who we are. Trever, did I miss anything? You want to add anything?
No, that's great. I've been with the company 6 years and glad to be part of the team.
Awesome. So this is where we are on the spectrum of design thinking. This is the third in the series of you guys going through kind of design thinking and how do you innovate using that particular methodology. So you've been through the empathy phase and kind of understanding where your customers' pain points are and the feelings associated with those pain points. Last series you went through kind of creating, brainstorming, generating ideas with Michael Weiss. And Trever and I are kind of going to close up here on the tail end of how do you then take those ideas And how do you, select the right one to work on? How do you design your prototype? And then how do you take it and pilot it or test it? So we're going to tag team this a little bit, although I'll say I'm going to do most of the talking on the front end of idea selection. And then Trevor's going to take you through kind of prototype piloting, because he does that very well at Kenco. So he has a project management certification, and he applies those techniques to actually making sure that pilots are run successfully and we can prove the concept. So we, a little bit different than a lot of you, are in the for-profit market. So if I'm going to deliver an innovation into Kenco, I have to be able to prove the value of it. So at the end of the day, my prototype has to show that it's going to deliver value to Kenco or to my customers in some form or fashion. So Trever does a good job of making sure on the front end we understand what that value is going to be and measuring it throughout the pilot to be able to show that to our leadership. So let's jump in. So we're going to talk about some idea selection tools today, and by no means am I going to go through every one that's out there. If you Google idea selection, I don't know, you probably get 100,000 hits or something, but we're not going to talk about those. So at this point in the process, we've defined our how might we statement. We've generated hundreds, maybe thousands of ideas. And the one thing I'll recommend to you, you often find that people key in on an idea of somebody else, and then they want to go down the path of, oh, and it could do this, and we could add this to it, and we can make it better by doing this. So once you've got all of your ideas and your Post-it notes generated, I would encourage you to pull out the ones that are more, this is a function, not a solution, so that you're not trying to sort through things that are really not a solution to the problem. And then the next thing I would encourage you to do is combine those that are very similar. So if you do have a feature function that fits with one of your solutions, cluster that together. So we'll talk about an affinity diagram in a minute, and that's really all that is just clustering your ideas that make sense together, and consolidate if you possibly can. The fewer ideas you can cull down to in the beginning makes it easier for you to go through the selection process. I'm going to give you a lot of tools here, but I would say pick one or two. Don't try to do them all because that will slow down your process. You do have to understand what your culture is and how your team makes decisions. So if you have a very let's get everybody on board consensus methodology within your organization, there are tools that lead themselves to be better for that. If you have a very data-driven culture, the ranking method will be very good for your culture. So understand who are your folks that are helping decide on what the idea is that you're going to work on, and kind of tailor the tool a little bit of those. And then also look at the time frame you have to make a decision, because some of these can take a long time to select and go through the process, and some of them can be really quick. So the idea selection tools on the left, we're going to go through each one of these, and I'll give you kind of some scenarios around these and what I think the pros and cons of them are. So dot voting is probably the most popular, right? So we've asked the question, how might we feed lunch to the folks on the warehouse floor every day this week? And we've come up with a solution called pizza. And there's all these different types, and we're just all going to go put dots on the board as to what we like the best. So basically, it's the highest number of dots. That's the solution we're going to work on, and the next lowest number is the next, and whatever. So it's kind of a very much democracy rules. The success factor here again goes back to make sure your ideas are clustered together, so they're not voting on vegetarian and green peppers. The green peppers have been clustered under vegetarian, and they're voting on vegetarian, right? There are some ideas to make this more successful. You can play with the number of votes that you give each person. More or less may drive a different outcome. You can use colors versus it being, I've got the green dots and Trever has the blue dots. You can use the colors to classify the nature of those votes. so that the green dots are all engineering focused, the red dots are the sales focused. You can do it that way. You can give people larger and smaller dots. So if they really, really, really like an idea, they can put the big dot on that idea. The downside of this one truly is, particularly if you're in a room where you're doing this as a group, peer pressure comes into play, right? So I am the leader of my group. I'm the vice president, and all of my employees see that I'm putting a dot on pepperoni pizza, so they're going to put a dot on pepperoni pizza, right? They really didn't want that. They really wanted sausage pizza, but they're going to vote for pepperoni because they saw me vote for pepperoni. So if there's a way for you to level the playing field there, particularly in this day and age of doing things digitally, where you can't see who's voting for what, and how many votes each idea is getting, maybe that's a better way of doing it. But this is not, we do this as a first pass exercise when we're running through workshops, and then we use other tools as well, because this is not likely going to get you to your best solution. It may eliminate a bunch that don't make sense, which is still a good exercise to run through, but it's not going to be your best solution at the end of the day. So that's what we call dot voting, check marks, whatever you want to call it. Everybody gets a vote, or 3 votes or 5 votes, and they just select the ideas they like the best. So this is one called the idea shopping cart that I really like to use, and I'll let Trevor chime in a minute, because I just ran a workshop Tuesday, and I put he and his team, as well as our other leadership development potential employees, through this, and the questions, and I'll read these questions to you, are less important than it is to try to help people get down to 6 ideas that they can then narrow to 3. So the top 6 boxes, this is what they say: an idea that you feel is original, an idea that could be implemented now, an idea that can be implemented 5 to 10 years from now, an idea that addresses a new market, customer, or user, an idea that's a new offering for you, or in this case for Kenco, and an idea that you just really like. So I'm asking them to take, now we've done the dot voting, I'm asking them to take all those that got a lot of dots and narrow that to 6. Each person has 6 ideas, right? And then I'm going to force them to choose from that 6, 3 more. So I'm going to get them down to 3 ideas. If the idea that addresses a new market, customer, user doesn't apply to you, then put something else in that quadrant. The selection criteria is less important than getting people to get down to 6 ideas, which then can easily get them to 3, if that makes sense. So, Trevor, do you have any comment there?
Yeah, we did this recently. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, what I'd suggest, if you're doing this with a group, you've got a dozen people. This picture right here shows these 9 quadrants, maybe on one poster board, but you're going to have everyone flocking to this one spot and kind of tripping over each other. So you might have these all separated out so that people can grab their favorite posties and place them around the room.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we're going to show you guys the tool that we use here in just a minute. The tool's name is Mural, M-U-R-A-L. It's an online digital design tool, I'll say. It does not get you through the prototyping phase, though. So it gets you all the way through brainstorming, idea selection, even agile work projects and things like that. But it does not get you into prototyping. So this is the idea shopping cart. I really like this one because you can tailor the questions to what makes sense to your organization, and you can get people to narrow their selection list to 6 and then narrow down to 3. And you can then use dot voting a second time on the 6 to say, let's get this down to 3 ideas, guys. Affinity diagrams is another type of, call it clustering, but more than just clustering, it's also kind of allowing you to see patterns. So if one idea feeds into another idea, or if one idea has components that would make sense with another idea. It gives you an ability to see parts of a whole, maybe bigger solution that you didn't think about. So maybe you have 3 ideas that if you combine those together and clustered those 3 ideas together, you would have an even broader solution than anybody came up with on their own. And it also allows you, like I said before, to capture components, functionality, capabilities, parts, whatever you want to call it, under each selection, so that you're not trying to sift through those as separate ideas. So this one I think is really valuable, whether you do dot voting and idea shopping cart anyway, just getting your ideas into groups. So I didn't have time, I'll tell you guys, in the workshop I ran on Tuesday, to do this one. And so what ended up happening as the groups went through their idea shopping cart and tried to select their top 3, I had 2 of the 5 groups that their top 3 was a solution, and then their idea number 2 was a functionality, not a solution. And so I think the clustering would have helped them tremendously if we had forced that ahead of time. And maybe they would have realized that, hey, all we have is a bunch of components. We don't have a solution. So we need to go back to the drawing board and ideate some more. And I think that's valuable as well. Sometimes when people, particularly if you have a facilitator, so this is a learning from me, and I'll give this to you guys, trying to run a digital workshop with 5 teams in Zoom rooms. I was running in and out of the Zoom rooms, and I couldn't be in there listening to what each of their facilitators, which in our case we call coaches for our teams, were doing. And so in a couple of groups, the coaches were leading them down a path of the decision they thought, the solution they thought would be a really good one. So I think that's, something to be careful of. If you're not able to facilitate the entire group, if you're breaking the group up into various teams and letting them go off and brainstorm on their own, that was an issue. You can't lead them down the path of what you think the solution is. So sorry for that rabbit trail. I'm going to go off on another one in a minute. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. Anyway,
Kristi, there's a question.
Diagrams are really important. Yes.
So Kristi, what is a solution when you say, you want a solution and not a functionality or a capability? What does that mean?
So the group I'm talking about, we had asked them, how do we get to a single source of the truth at Kenco? And so they had a solution, which was, let's get an enterprise cloud-based system that contains all of the information about Kenco. And then they also had a screen where you can sign in one time. Okay, well, the screen that I can sign in one time might be a component of the overall system, but it's not a solution to a single source of the truth at Kenco, right? So I think it can be a little murky, but if you think about truly, does this answer my how might we question? Does a single screen where I can sign on answer my question of how might we find a single source of the truth at Kenco? No, it really doesn't. So I think that is always go back and apply that how might we question, and you'll understand that it's not the whole picture, if that makes sense. Maybe it's a really good idea, but it goes in with it has to be grouped with something else to give me an entire solution. Does that make sense? We have, I think in our 5 teams this year, we have an IT person in 3 or 4 of them. I think, Trevor, I can't remember, you may know more than me, but the solutions tended to drift toward an IT type solution, which is fine, but I had to get them to understand I need the whole picture, not just pieces and parts of what this solution might be able to do.
But it gets back to that question. The solution is the answer to the how might we question. That was what was the clarification that I needed. Thank you.
Yes, it has to answer the question. So, and cover the entire answer. So I've had how might we questions that are time bound, that are, specific to a quantity of work that needs to be done. And the groups will come up with different answers, but they don't answer it within the time frame, or they don't answer the quantity. So I'll give you an example. How might we increase our throughput
in our warehouse facility by 10,000 pallets per month by July of 2021, right? And they would come up with wild, crazy ideas. We can put in this big automation solution. Okay, great, but that can't be implemented by July of 2021, right? So stay within the confines of the how might we question. And the and to me, forgive me if I'm stepping on somebody that said this before, but for me, the how might we question needs to be pretty specific, if possible, because it really does constrain them into, you want them to think in terms of no constraints, but the how might we will give you those constraints that lets them within those boundaries think about no cost, no resources, none of those constraints. If that makes sense. At least that's the way we do it at Kenco.
Hey, Kristi, have you discovered on the affinity, there was a question, is there a con to using that technique?
The affinity no, but it will not get you to the one idea. It will hopefully get you to 4 or 5 big solutions, but it's not going to get you down to the one, if that makes sense. You're going to have to use either dot voting, shopping cart. You're going to have to do something else with this one. This one, again, if you have a bunch of data-driven folks, this is a really good feasibility plot, if you want to call it that. You can create your own axis labels for what's most important to you as a company. So you see the first example, the hand-drawn one there I have. Is it easy to build? Is it hard to build? Am I excited about it? Am I not? So that it's meh. It's okay. It's a good solution, but it's not going to excite me. And the one in the upper right corner, you know, for us, for some of the things we were looking at is how important or how impactful is it going to be? Like, is it going to make my customer super happy or my employees super happy? And then how difficult is it to develop, implement, and how much is it going to cost? Which is a big thing. So you can kind of plot your ideas in these quadrants. And again, what's most important to you. So maybe you care more about the impact to your customer than you do about the difficulty and the cost. So if the cost is high, but it's going to really, really positively impact your audience, okay, then you take that. You know, you may be okay with that. That's why I say make your axes what you want them to be, because I think that it's more important for you to, you to do what you want. So think about this. How might we determine the makeup of the rings of Saturn? And we might come up with, let's build a rocket and let's send a geologist and a biologist and a chemist and a physicist and a pilot to Saturn. Okay, that's going to have a pretty high impact, but it's also going to have a really high cost, right? And a long time frame. Maybe for you, that makes sense. It wouldn't for me. Kenco would never do that. But maybe there's a way we could take something that already exists in our organization. Let's say we took the Hubble telescope and we took a sample and we brought it back to the geologist, the physicist, the chemists, the biologists, and we understood what the makeup of the rings of Saturn were. So again, I can't tell you what's most important to your organization. You know what it is, but you have to plot your ideas within this and make it make sense for you. This will allow you to eliminate those that are off the charts expensive or just are not really going to matter at the end of the day, or are too hard to build with the resources that you have. So I know that Michael mentioned this 4 categories method. A lot of people use this one. I don't find it terribly helpful, but I'm going to tell you about it just because it exists. So you can have people categorize their ideas into what's most rational, what's most delightful. In other words, what's going to make my customer most happy. This is just a darling idea because I love it. And then this is a real long shot, guys, right? And so depending on the makeup of your room, you're going to find that your engineers and your finance people are always going to put what's most rational. Your salespeople and your account management people are always going to put most delightful. Everybody's going to have their idea that they already had before they came in the room, and they think it's super exciting and everybody should go for it. And then it's pretty easy for people to know, if they know your organization, to understand where the long shots are. So you know, if you only choose the most rational ones, you likely are going to make incremental change versus transformational change. If you only pick what's most delightful, you're probably going to end up with a really expensive solution because it's going to be, we want to, you know, give the customer everything they want. Well, that's probably not possible. So I would say try to land somewhere in between those two, but I don't find this one terribly helpful. You can do it, you can run through the process, but you're still going to have to use one or two more tools to really get you to where you can be successful. That's just,
Hey, Kristi, this is Patrick. Hey, I'm just curious. This could potentially be one of those areas where you use different colored dots as you're voting to represent these 4 categories as well. Just a different take on combining those 2 ideas together.
That's for sure. And I guess that's my takeaway with this one is you are going to have 1 or 2 more tools to do this. But, and again, depending on what you're trying to achieve with your how might we, you know, if you're looking for something that is going to make people flock to your service, maybe most delightful is where you want all those dots to land. That's fine. And maybe at this point, there's a way for you to go back once you've done this piece and do the affinity where you say, okay, in those ones that fall in the most delightful, are there 2 or 3 I can combine together to make a more holistic solution that's really going to delight my customer? So the ranking methodology is the next one. This is what my entire team, except for Trevor and I, use for everything because they're a bunch of engineers. So everything has to be ranked. The software, the IT guys do it too. This tends to be the more practical, data-driven way of making a decision. So you would list your ideas down the left-hand, let's say the rows of the spreadsheet, and spreadsheet's probably the best way to do this. You would list your key success factors across the top, your decision criteria, whatever they may be. You define your weighting scale, and you'd have everybody rank the ideas, either a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10, whatever you want it to be. And then you would multiply their rank times the weight and add that across and get the total. So let's say we're all trying to decide where we're going to go for dinner today. So we've got a Greek restaurant and a Mexican restaurant and a Japanese restaurant and a Chinese restaurant, and we've got a good old American steakhouse. And everybody needs to rank those. And across the top, we need to understand, you know, our top weighted criteria is going to be, you know, allergies that people have. We don't want to go somewhere that somebody can't eat there because of allergies. Second thing is going to be the distance from where we are. The third thing could be, you know, the type of restaurant. And the fourth thing maybe the restaurant score. We don't want to go someplace that's got a really bad score on their restaurant. So you'd weight those, you know, highest to lowest, and then everybody would, without necessarily seeing the weighted score, would rank them on their own, and then you would consolidate the data. And you come back and say, okay, project number 1, idea number 1, we're going to the Greek restaurant and we're going for dinner and we're going to the one around the corner, right? So this one is a very data-driven way to do it. It kind of leaves a little bit of the discussion and the empathy around it out of the process. So I kind of like some of the others because it allows us to do a lot of conversation and talking about why I'm selecting this versus I'm selecting that, or why I think this is a higher rated one than another one. But if you have a bunch of data guys, it's a good one. So the kind of the last one that I'll talk about, this one takes time, let me say. So this is the 6 hats method, and this was put forward by a gentleman named De Bono. And what he really is trying to get at is put yourself in the shoes of the various different pieces of the aspect of the how might we question, right? And the people who you might be designing for. And this is a role-playing piece. So you actually have people in the room on your team take on one of these hats. I've bought hats of these color and made everybody in the room wear the little party hat that is their color. And as you're discussing potential solutions, the person wearing, let's say, the green hat is long shot out there going, yeah, and we could build a rocket and we could do this and we could do, they're like the big picture thinker, right? The person who's wearing the black hat is going to go, no, we can't afford that, and our insurance is not going to let us build a rocket, and if we do, we're going to have to pay this, and we're going to have to do this. They're the very negative personality. The person wearing the red hat is just going to be throwing gut instinct out there, whatever comes to the top of their mind. Well, I think that would be a great idea because so-and-so would love that. The white hat is always the facts, data, logic person. We need to go run some reports. We need to understand, do we even have the rocket fuel to build the rocket engine? I mean, they're very factual. So you get the concept, right? You're having people role play as they're discussing potential solutions, and they're bringing the different perspectives to the table. And maybe that helps you eliminate one or two because a risk is raised during that conversation that is so big that you go, oh my gosh, we need to throw that idea out. we didn't even think about that was a potential that could happen. We don't think that, we don't want to tackle that idea.
Kristi, could you use this before or after one of the other methods to vet them against each other?
You could, for sure. So if you've got two or three ideas that people just go, gosh, I think we could do any one of these, they're really great, then maybe you put yourself in that, that kind of role playing. So I'll give you a scenario here to help you kind of see how this would play out, and then I'm gonna get off of this idea selection topic, and we're going to talk about prototyping. So let's imagine that we're directors of a property company, and we're trying to decide if we're going to build a whole new building in downtown in an office block, right? Let's not COVID-19 time. The economy's doing well, and vacant office buildings are getting snapped up like crazy, right? So the white hat is going to look at all the data that they have. Available office space is dwindling. The new office building would cost X. The existing space would be in short supply. We can make this much money off of it. The red hat, maybe they look at it and go, well, the buildings that we have now are really ugly, so we could build a really pretty building and everybody would want to be in our building. This is the feeling, right? Ugly, pretty. The black hat, they're going to go, oh, the economy's good right now, but maybe the forecast could be wrong. Maybe we're going to have a downturn in the next 6 months. Where in the yellow hat, which tends to be positive, right? They're going to go, oh no, the economy is going to be fine, and the company's going to make a healthy profit on this. We're going to sell the building. If it downturns, we'll just sell it. It's no problem, right? So this is yellow hat. Green hat, which is the creative person, starts thinking about maybe we could redesign the building to make it more appealing. Maybe we could have tier 1 prestige offices on the top floor, right? So then they start thinking from their perspective how to do that. And then typically your leader of the meeting wears the blue hat, I'll say, so that they keep the process moving, right? So that they just keep the ideas flowing and encourage everybody to give their perspectives. But now you've looked at it from all the different points of view, and you can decide, do we really want to build a building downtown right now, or should we wait? So it's called the 6 hats method. You can Google it. You'll find a ton of information on it. So let's jump into talking about prototyping, but I'm going to go on a rabbit trail for just a minute. And I deliberately did this because most of you are in the service industry, and service prototyping is so much harder than product prototyping. And it's because we're not trying to test or prove the viability of this product. I'm not handing you something and saying, would you use this? We're testing for the value. How do you feel about this experience? We're testing for a cohesive experience within our organization. Does this tie to our mission, vision, values? Does it deliver the value that we want for our customers? So it's a lot harder. So I'm going to give you some tips, and we're going to share this presentation, by the way. But take a look at the moments that matter when you're dealing with your audience, whether it's your users, your customers, your employees, whatever it is. Be on the lookout for those early indicators of something's not as good as it could be, and how do we fix that? And then talk to those people that are actually delivering the service. And Trever will talk about this a little bit, but those people that are out there doing the process every day, they can help you more than anybody. and use those time-based moments. Like in the moment that a person is having a crisis, what am I doing to help them in that moment? Ask people, ask them their opinion. How would you do this better? How could we do this in such a way that you would be delighted when you walked away? And then put some constraints in place that maybe force you to stretch outside of your own, your normal thinking, right? So push beyond what you're forced to use all the way. Maybe you think about different spaces, different places to do things, to connect with people that you need to connect with. You know, maybe you think about delivering things in a different way. Today you hand it to somebody. Is there a way to do that digitally? You give yourself some different constraints. COVID-19 is forcing us all to have different constraints than we've ever had. So it's just a different way of looking at doing prototyping for a service, because it is difficult. We recognize that. So we're in the service business, so totally understand that. So I am gonna give the screen to Trevor and let him share it from his perspective, so I don't have to be going next slide, moving for him. So, and then he's gonna talk to you about prototyping.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot, Kristi. So before we talk about prototyping, I assume you can see my screen there with the 2 Post-it notes. I want to make this a little interactive and hear from you. What is the big idea that's bumping around in the back of your mind right now? Because there's no way you could have gotten through these 3 sessions and not be thinking of some idea. And I don't want you to give away your trade secrets, but are you thinking of an event, Carla? Are you thinking of a website, a new service at United Way? Just in a word or phrase, I just want you guys to call out. And I'll write them down here so we can kind of talk and customize our prototyping discussion to what you guys are thinking about. So unmute yourself. And
so one of the things we're wondering about is, should we do a technology workforce report?
a technology workforce
Report.
Okay.
Where you profile the number of, you take a bunch of job categories and profile how many jobs there are, how many jobs are open. It's been done by other councils.
Okay. The report. Awesome.
Patrick put in there virtual community roundtables.
Yeah, so I put on virtual community roundtables. One of the things we want to do is, as we are trying to tackle these large, huge social impact outcomes that we're trying to deliver on, we would love to get a larger base of people to share their input and ideas and feedback into that project. So
That's awesome. All right. There's a few others who are muted that we maybe haven't heard from, but love to hear a few other ideas.
A coaching program, business coaching program.
Trevor's in the mural tool, by the way, guys.
Yes, I meant to say that. This is Mural, and I'm in really the simplest thing you can possibly do here is throw up Post-it notes, but you can do a whole lot more. It's really cool. Another one or two.
I've got one, Trevor. Mary Ellen Galloway. So we're looking into the idea of using motels as temporary housing for homeless and displaced individuals.
Great.
Temporary housing, right? Good.
Yeah, awesome. Do we have one more? Okay. Well, I think that's really neat. Obviously, we have a very diverse group of things that we're trying to do here. Let's see. I got another idea. Kinder app that could serve as matchmaking service for childcare. That's cool. So Kinder app. I love apps. Okay. So with those in mind, let's hop over here to our prototyping. And And just right off the bat, why are we prototyping? So we've spent a whole session or two thinking about what's our big idea. So we have a great idea. It's still a big leap to get it out there as a real product or service. So how are we going to fill that gap to actually get to our destination? And that's where a prototype comes in. So if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 pictures. A prototype lets you get something up on the board so that people can look at it, talk about it, eliminate ambiguity. So if you're doing a website, someone might say, oh, I really thought we were doing this, or I thought the button was here. A prototype will allow you to get these issues on the table so that y'all can talk about it. It gets the conversation started and allows you to fail quickly and cheaply. So instead of going to market with the ultimate product and then find out at the end, oh, people don't like this, start out with a prototype, quick and dirty, learn lessons from it. And there are a lot of ways to do these prototypes. Number one might be paper. All right. And in the digital age, I often use PowerPoint to bring ideas to life. PowerPoint's a great prototyping tool. And what you do is just quickly throw up a slide for every step in your process. Okay. It gets in front of people. It's easy to show and share. It's easy to modify. You can shuffle the slides around as needed. So paper or virtual paper to storyboard the idea, to start getting some feedback on it. Now, paper is not the only medium. The sky's the limit. Your imagination's the limit. You could use clay. You could grab some kids' Legos and start acting out, hey, how might this service work? Cardboard, styrofoam, duct tape. If you need a new idea for like a playground or something, build it out with pipe cleaners, cardboard. Go down to Lowe's and get a few sticks of wood and make something on the cheap. You can walk through it and see, hey, this makes sense, or no, that part needs to be a little bigger or smaller, right? So any physical prototypes will be really useful to you. And we talked about our lab earlier. So this is an area that we have set out in our warehouse lab, just for an example, where we have some shelving, different types of shelving and racking that you might find in a warehouse. So this is probably 1/100th of the size of what an actual warehouse area might be, but it's large enough that we're able to try a lot of things here. So you might build a little scale model of what you're thinking of. Anything to visualize it, create a mock-up to simulate that product or service. We touched about storyboarding, right? So especially if you were working on a process or a service, you want to describe each step of the scene, right? So maybe step number 1 is a client walks through the door. Step number 2, sit down with the caseworker. Step number 3, they see the services, whatever, but you just want to outline every step that you're going to go through, or maybe every page on the web page or app. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So here's a neat tool. I'm actually going to paste it in the chat for everyone, and I've used this quite a bit. Let's see if it brings up my chat window here. This is called Balsamic. I think there's a few other tools out there, and you know, it's made more for apps or web pages, but it's a great wireframing tool, and you can use it to easily mock up even a service or a process. Just throw it out there. There's all kinds of preset boxes and diagrams that you can use. And so what's the purpose of a wireframe if you haven't done it before? Number 1, you can easily show the information. Number 2, it shows the outline and the structure of what you're planning. And then number 3, it's going to show how the user is going to interact with it. So you can see some wireframes that I've made here on a mobile app we were working on. And this comes together in just a few minutes. It's a great tool. It's either free or very cheap. So we found that useful. But the whole
Is there a difference between storyboarding and wireframing, or are those basically the same thing?
So wireframing has been used a lot more in like mobile app or website creation. But you can use wireframing to demonstrate the flow of the process or the storyboard.
Storyboard tends to be drawing, Carla, and I like to use it specifically because it forces people to use the creative side of their brain as they're thinking about a problem. They have to draw pictures of what they think would solve the problem, and it taps into the other side of their brain versus the data facts logic side of their brain.
Yeah, that's a good point. So storyboarding would probably be more in that ideation, sitting down, sketching out those initial ideas, or this would be probably where you're a little further down,
yeah,
creating those prototypes, right? Good question. Mouse button's going crazy here. So there's a type of prototyping called Wizard of Oz prototyping. And what you're doing here is you're basically making something work manually, right? So you've got, say, you might have a jukebox, okay? Let's take a jukebox, for instance. Instead of creating all the technology to make it work, you would have what the person would interact with, buttons or whatever, but then you'd have a person behind the scenes actually physically moving the discs around or whatever. So instead of going to all the work of putting all the pieces together and all the technology, you might not do that. You might have someone behind the scenes kind of making things happen artificially just to prove the point and prove out the idea of how things might work. So we call that Wizard of Oz prototyping, where you're mimicking how that interaction might actually happen. It's kind of a fun way of doing it. Here's another tool that we've used, and I thought I had a link for it, but Kristi, you can tell what this is.
Yeah, so this is just a whiteboarding tool. So it creates a whiteboard video of your concept. So I literally built this video in like 3 minutes. The tool is called Doodly, DOODLY.com. Pretty inexpensive. I think it's like $69 or something for a small team for I don't know if that's a month or a year. I apologize. But it's fairly inexpensive, and you're just hopping in there, and it has thousands and thousands and thousands of templates of characters and various scenes and props, and you just drag and drop them in, and you can add music and you can add script, and you're just kind of allowing people to understand how you would, and I think it helps you. If you have to write a script, it truly helps you visualize how somebody might use your service. So, let's say we think we're gonna create a mobile food truck for people to get lunch meals, right? And we're gonna park at this park every day. And you start thinking through that, and you go, so they're gonna walk up here. Well, they can't because they can't get there. Okay, well, how do we solve that problem? It starts as you start thinking things through and showing it in this little video. You go, well, okay, that's really cool, but where did she get that life preserver to help save that person, right? Where'd that come from? Literally, I'm telling you, 3 minutes is how long it took me to do this. And there's no music or script to this one, but you can see the kind of things you can do. But it also helps your leadership. For us, it helps our leadership visualize what we're trying to say and what we're trying to pitch to them to get a solution done.
Yep, and I posted a link to another one, Render Forest, which is similar here to create these videos on the fly. So now we get to focus groups. Everyone loves focus groups. And when you go about doing this, you bring your focus group to look at a prototype. It's all about setting this up properly. Number one, you to choose who's going to be in your group. All right. You need everyone from the CEO up and down. You need a good cross section of all your users, anyone who could actually be using it, because everyone's got a different set of glasses, a different set of preconceptions, skill levels, etc. You want anyone who might be touching and interacting with your idea to be a part of it. Set the context. Let people know what they're doing, why they're there. Define expectations. Tell them why you're here, what you're expecting from them. And outline some of the assumptions. You might tell them, hey, this feature here isn't working quite right yet, or we want you to focus on this. Let them know what you're wanting out of the session. And then you really want to stand back. You don't want to tell people, hey, this is how you're supposed to interact with this website or use this service. You want to see them kind of stumbling their way through it, because that will be a really, really good feedback for you. And if they can talk out loud and verbalize what they're thinking along the way, you might have to encourage them to do that. But you want to hear what's going on in their head as they're interacting and looking at these prototypes. Observe what they're doing. There's really not a wrong way to interact with a prototype. So if they're doing something wrong, technically wrong from your point of view, that's feedback for you, right? So if they pull up a web page and they go and click at the wrong place, well, maybe you need to have more instructions there or move things around. So everything that they do is really, really good feedback for you. And then you want to ask them lots of questions like, can you tell how this made you feel? Or what do you think that button does before you click on it? Ask lots of questions. And then, as you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're organizing the feedback that you get really well. You put a ton of effort into getting all these focus groups together, all these people in one place. You want to make sure you're capturing that information very well. So along the way, you want to be writing down what's working well, what needs to change, what questions people had that you might not have been able to answer, or they might have had an insight about new ideas that you want to try. So try to capture this data down in real time. You don't want to try to write it down after the fact. You got to be taking notes. Watch their body language. Is there anything that seems clunky that you need to smooth out, etc. So make sure you're capturing this information.
Hey, Tyler, can you talk a little bit more about the selecting participants wisely? What are some ways that you guys categorize or think through the who? Like, do you guys focus on extreme users? Do you use like Enneagram sort of number? Like, how do you go about finding the right people to invite to a focus group?
Well, I think it really depends on what the use case is, but let me give you one example. So we're using a special headset that identifies hand movements, and it's basically, the headset has to see the person's hand. You have to have some contrast there. So you've got to have all different colors of skin pigment trying that out. If you don't, you might have a failure out there, right? So really think about who's going to be interacting this. You can't bring everyone in, of course, but who are my main users, who are the power users, who are the inexperienced users, or the people who have been doing this for 30 years already. I think the basic idea is cross section, right?
And we do have some extreme users, Patrick. It depends on the scenario, but we want to know where those outliers are so we can say, okay, we're only going to try to address this component or this segment, right? Trever ran one recently where he was testing augmented reality, And he actually brought in some folks who were, you know, in their late 50s, early 60s to say, okay, they're kind of extreme users. You're going to put this thing on their head, and they're used to, you know, picking things with their hands. And yeah, it doesn't work with those guys. So when we go to implement that solution now, or the company, we have kind of made a caveat that says you need to ensure that you have options for these folks that are over 50, because they don't prefer to interact with the augmented reality.
Yeah, and I know we're getting short on time here, but you have this circle, and there's different words used for it, agile processes, etc. But the idea is you want to keep a continuous feedback loop going. You get the feedback from users, from focus groups, you incorporate that feedback into your prototype, into your product, you improve it, and then you can circle back to your focus groups and do that whole iteration again as long as you want. You can keep going, you can keep going until you feel like the product is where it needs to be. So really the next step then is to do what's called the MVP, the minimum viable product. So if you think about a donut, you know, before you do all the flavors and sprinkles and all the different variations, start with the most simple possible form of your idea and try that out before you get too far, and make sure that that is something that people are actually going to use and be interested in. Of course, when you did brainstorming, I'm sure you came up with 300 different cool things that you would love to add on to your product. Don't do that, okay? Keep those in your back pocket, but what's the minimum viable product that we can identify and put out there for people to try? See how that works, and then go from there. So this approach that we have is a very lean approach, agile approach. Instead of doing the whole thing at once, you want to do as low risk as possible, right? Every step along the way, talk to people, get feedback, iterate. And each step of the way, you can go a little further, a little bigger budget, and validate as you go along. How are you going to know if your project, if your prototype is successful? You put it out there in the wild and people are using it. Number one, make sure you have some baseline measurements. Everyone's going to say, oh, it's cool, we loved it. Well, how can we dig beneath those comments and really find some hard numbers? So it's really important before you start something, get some hard data of this is how we currently are. This is the money we're making, or the costs we're currently incurring, or the traffic flow to our website, whatever. Get a before statistic. And then as you go along, you can measure the difference, the before and after. Define the length. You don't want a pilot to be running out there for months and months indefinitely. Define a length of time that you're going to try this out, and then report on when you're done with that time. Make sure you pick your group size properly. If you build a product and try it with one person for 3 months, you might realize, I really need more feedback. We should have tried that with 5 people or 10 people. So think about what is the minimum number of people that need to touch and try your product to really get a proper number of data points and good feedback. Because you don't want to get to the end of your project and realize, hey, we should have had more people giving us feedback on this. And speaking of feedback, make sure you do schedule regular feedback. It might be a weekly call, monthly call, check in. Hey, how's it going? How are you enjoying this, or whatever? Get that feedback. And if all goes well, congratulations. You've taken your idea from baby steps all the way through these steps, and hopefully now you have a product or service or event that you're able to launch and release to the public. So hopefully those steps will be useful as you brainstorm and work through some of your ideas that are running around the back of your mind that you're thinking of launching. So I know we're up against the clock here, but do we have a few minutes for a few questions that might have popped into your mind?
Trevor, take it to the next slide. There you go.
Okay, here we go. Here's a few resources.
So these resources are all free, by the way, and a good bit of this information, as we've put it together, has come from these different folks. So the one I find particularly helpful and I wanted to share with you guys was this blog from the Board of Innovation that's 100 sources that every innovation professional should know about. And there's a lot of tools and tips and tricks, and it's just really helpful information.
Are you emailing this out to everybody?
Yes.
Ada, thank you.
Yeah, this will be emailed out this afternoon.
We are local, and we are very much a part of this community. So as you guys, think of questions after the fact or concerns or want to ask us about anything, we're happy to share, and we'd love to connect with you and find what you're doing that's successful. I think innovation is all about trying different things and finding success. So, we'd love to connect with you and hear your stories as well.
Awesome. Well, Kristi and Trevor, thank you both so much for sharing today. I know I see Carla clapping hands. We so appreciate it. I know I was taking notes like left and right, making sure I caught a few of the different tools that I hadn't heard of. And so I'm excited to hopefully be able to try them in the future. But thank you so much. This has been very helpful. And for everyone on the call, we do have the PowerPoint, so that will be shared out this afternoon, as well as the link to this recording. So you can go back if Kristi or Trevor said something that you just really wanted to remember, go back, rewatch it once, twice, 3 times. But like they said, they're both in the area and they'd be happy to answer questions post today's conversation. But anyways, we hope that you have a great Friday and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Everybody,
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Trevor. Thank you, Kristi.
Really good.